There comes a time in most people's lives where they hold on to a frustration or a resentment or an enemy just for a little bit too long. A little bit too long, so it's unhealthy and that there's an imbalance and that something needs to happen because the person just will be feeling frustrated or left behind or bitter either about themselves or to the world. And we need to take a step back in moments like this and realise what's actually going on a deeper level. So I'm going to be quoting from one of my favourite books, Finite and Infinite Games by James Cast for this, and we're going to be looking at point number 33 around this idea of enemies, just to be able to ground our conversation. So this is talking about it on a bigger scale in terms of war, but the same will be relevant, or the same point will be relevant on a smaller scale. So to quote from the book, "No nation can go to war until it has found another that can agree to the terms of the conflict. Each side must therefore be in complicity with the other. Before I can have an enemy, I must persuade another to recognise me as an enemy." Now that's on a big scale there regarding war, but the exact same thing is true on a smaller scale. It takes two people to play a game, so in this case let's refer to it as the enemy game, where you hate one person and they hate you. It's complete back and forth, you're sending them insults, they're sending you them back. There's a real conflict going on, there's a real feud, there's a real enemy sort of situation that's happening there, where whatever you are giving out is being met and it's being brought back in both cases. So the energy is going to be spiraling upwards, but at least both people are complicit in that game. Now, let's say 6 months later, that other person has just completely moved on with their life, but that you're still playing that enemy game with them. So you're still sending out all that frustration and all that anger and all that vengeance, but you're not getting any of it back. Then there's a real imbalance that has opened up there, where you're no longer playing a game. It takes two people to play that enemy game. If you're playing it on your own, all that's happening there is that you're becoming frustrated at someone else who is refusing to play that game. And the game can't really take place if there's only one person playing it, especially when it's going to involve another person, such as the case of the enemy game, as we're calling it for this. So what we need to realise is, in that particular point, there is something still within us which is energetically linked to that other person. Whatever it is, whatever situation has happened, whatever anger or frustration or event which has happened in the past, I've thrown something from myself and it's hooked onto them. And as a result, I'm still tied to them. A part of who I am, a part of my well-being, a part of how I view myself and my identity is linked to another person that couldn't care less, that has moved on with their life. And that can be really, really difficult. So what we need to realise in that moment is, if I'm the one that has thrown that hook and that projection, then I'm in charge of unhooking from them. Because if they're unaware of this, if they're unaware that that's what I've been doing, then how could they take responsibility for it? It might have been 6 months earlier that we were playing that enemy game backwards and forwards, but if at some point someone else has stopped playing, then they can't be held accountable. In the same way, if let's say at school you were playing football on the playground and you've got two teams that are playing and somebody scores a goal against the other person, in the rules of the game, fine, 1-0, it makes sense, everyone has agreed to that. But if one side has gone back to their lesson and the other team is still outside playing the game, it's not really fair. It's breaking the implied rules of the game that other team then could just keep knocking the ball into the empty net every single time and then winning 20-30-0. It's not in the spirit of the game in that case, because the two teams are no longer playing against each other. It's just one team breaking all of the rules and overstepping the boundaries. And that's what's happening on a smaller scale over here, where two people might have been playing that enemy game to begin with, but if one person has stepped away from the field of play and it's only you remaining, then there comes a question of when is it that I want to stop playing this? Because if I'm still playing the enemy game, if I'm still throwing out all those projections and hooking onto them, all that's going to happen is that I'm going to become bitter and resentful and judgmental, not only of the other person, but ultimately about myself and about the world in general. Because nothing's going to happen otherwise. That other person is unconscious of all of this. They can't possibly fix it. So we need to follow that line back and realize, oh, I was the one who threw that hook. And as a result, I can unhook from them. And if it takes two people to play that game and there's only one person playing, then maybe I should just play a different game. Maybe I should play a better game in that case. And that can be really, really difficult. It's not as simple as maybe as that suggestion sort of sounds at this particular point in time, but it's realizing that in that case where 6 months had passed, I'm still assuming that the world is the same as it was 6 months ago, and I've not updated it. I've not looked around at what's actually going on for me at this particular moment and updating the stories that would follow. I've not updated who I am as a result of it all. I'm hanging on to a former version of me, one that's stuck in the past and that can't do anything about this situation. One that was playing the enemy game at that point in time, to carry on our example, but realizing that 6 months ago and now are two different time periods, and I'm a different person as well. So although it might have been okay to play a certain game at one point, maybe it isn't okay to play it now. In the same way it was okay to play football at break time, but it's a little bit different if you're playing during a lesson where the other team are in the classroom. The rules need to be updated, the situation is updated. And what we need to do is to be able to come to terms with the fact that some things and some explanations and some stories which we held so truly and so deeply and so meaningfully at one point in our life, they need to be let go of at a certain point. So that's the compassionate question that I'm asking at this point in time, which is, what are some of the stories that you have held on to for just a little bit too long? What games are you playing that made sense 6 months ago, a year ago, 10 years ago, that a part of you is still playing and no longer needs to?